Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He's a TV wise guy, a progressive patriot, a prolific author and editor of books Political, a consumer watchdog and public advocate, except for a perfect storm, the mayor of New York City, and now the president of Air America Radio. He's Mark Green, and he's here to talk about talk radio, George Bush, Rudy, Hillary, Bloomy, what's wrong with the Democrats, and a lot more. Welcome back, Mark.
How much time do we have?
Well, we're going to talk fast.
Okay, thank you. Well, you do. I'll try to keep up.
Okay, now,
this is hard.
In my search through the web, there is a draft Mark Green for president. 2008, and there's no minimum order. You can get these bumper stickers.
I have neither seen this nor am behind it. And what's the point? I mean,
it says, rare is the candidate whose integrity and track record set him or her above the political pack.
And
and you are, according to this, an alternative to the usual suspects, and it says draft Mark Green. You don't know anything about this.
I do not know anything about it. I haven't seen it.
You haven't heard about this before today.
Somebody mentioned it to me. But look, I'm not going to run because one person says. Now, two people asked me. I'd have to think
okay,
about
wait a minute. Okay, that gets to the question.
All right.
Do you miss it? Do you miss the give and take of the electoral and political arena? Because you're an addict.
Rarely, but occasionally. Because when I was public advocate and when I was thinking of being mayor, the idea is that if you think that women who are victims of domestic violence shouldn't be fired for just that reason, I wrote a law, it was enacted, it protected such women. And so you have the power to get something like that done, concrete. As a head of a radio network, as an author, you have enormous gratification, but not that direct one-to-one influence. So I occasionally miss it.
Okay. Losing let's turn to the book. And it's coming out in paper?
In 3 weeks.
Okay. Losing Our Democracy, How Bush, the Far Right, and Big Business Are Betraying Americans for Power and Profit. What's the thesis here? What's the argument?
Bush wants a one-man rule, contrary to all the constitutional traditions of this country. And based on the way he's governed, he's way more extreme than in the mainstream. If democracy means transparency rather than secrecy, the rule of law, merit rather than money prevailing in government, he has this authoritarian impulse. So if the majority of the Congress and the country don't want the war, for example, he'll just go ahead irrespective of what the Constitution says. His frequent violations of law on wiretapping, on Guantanamo, the Supreme Court twice has said, kind of not allowed to torture and you have to give due process hearings, show that while I don't push for impeachment because it's a futile act which won't occur,
right.
Politically it's not a smart thing, let the election occur in 08. Mm-hmm. On the merits, he has committed impeachable acts far more, for example, than Bill Clinton, who was impeached and then acquitted.
What's the nature of the indictment? You talk about voter suppression, religious, corporate, and legislative tyranny. Is it that bad? Are we losing the democracy?
Well, of 22 Western democracies, we are 21st in voter turnout, and it's not an accident. We need a law. If it's criminal to sell a product that you're lying about and can injure you, it should be criminal if the government frustrates voters by a group of people handing out flyers. I saw them in Ohio when I tried to help John Kerry at the end in 04. Because of a lot of people registering, I saw this. Republicans vote on Tuesday, Democrats on Wednesday. And Democrats, you can't vote if you owe the utility company money, and if you do, you'll lose your children. We can laugh about it. Low-income, credulous, new arrivals get scared by government saying this. So it should be a crime. We shouldn't have a system where the wealthiest people can either bundle or give themselves money, and elections turn on money rather than results. So There are a whole series of ways, pre-Bush and Cheney, that we're like losing altitude in our democracy. And then they come along. And the law says that you have to get a warrant from a special court if you want to wiretap somebody because you suspect they're talking to a foreign agent. They ignored it. They just ignored it.
Yeah, but wait a minute. The Democrats, Tuesday's New York Times, October 9th headline, Democrats seem ready to extend wiretap powers. Come on.
Some of the Democrats lack backbone, no doubt, but it's the Bush people who are using the war on terror to undo 217 years of our constitutional traditions. Listen, I saw, you saw, our audience saw what happened on 9/11. 9/11, horrific as it was, is not more important than the United States Constitution. And these people can't leave soon enough. If they had their way, they have a theory called the unitary executive. It's monarchical government, where Bush and Cheney say they think that you're subversive. It's not just that they arrest you in the 50s. They can arrest you, incarcerate you without lawyers forever because the war on terror is forever. It's not like a finite thing like World War II. So if they got their way, I believe we wouldn't be losing, we would lose our democracy. And that's why the 2008 presidential election is so pivotal. We'll either save it or lose it further.
Let me quote on page 321. Washington is now the occupied territory of democracy, a city being run by and for the wealthy, the religious, and the ideological. I mean, a little hyperbole?
Not then. The book was before the 06 election.
Okay.
And at that time,
May of 06,
at that time, Jerry Falwell and James Dobson, religious right fanatics, frankly. You know, Falwell said that the Clintons murdered Vince Foster. And he has a speed dial into the White House. The religious right doesn't believe in the wall of separation between church and state. Half of Bush's base are the religious right. If he has ever, Doug, disagreed with them on a major issue, and he didn't on Terry Schiavo, I'm unaware of it. As for wealthy over the rest of us, here we have a situation where real median income of the average worker in this country has been flat for their 7 years. And nearly all of the productivity gain and most of the tax cuts go to the top 1%. Well, if that's not a government for the wealthy, I don't know how you define it.
Okay, let's move into to what you're doing now, and that is the media. I mean, the media, talk radio, is a right-wing province, and it has been since 1990, the early 90s.
Right.
What is the nature of the influence here, and what is Air America? Where does that fit into this spectrum?
Well, right-wing radio is very influential. Minority Leader Trent Lott of Mississippi said, talk radio is running America. He meant because of the way Rush Limbaugh et al. Were attacking the immigration reform package that failed in part because the Republican base got so excited about it. Air America is trying to break up the right-wing monopoly of talk radio. 10, 15 years ago, the first talk radio emerges, and it's conservative. Rush Limbaugh,
sure,
always wrong but always entertaining, is a talent, and he does very well. So we try to also get on radio stations around the country. Air America is a network. We're on 60 affiliates, which is far less than the other team. Why?
Right.
I have to deal with gatekeepers called Citadel, Salem, Clear Channel. These are conservative companies who decide who gets on stations because they own the stations. Imagine if I was playing in the World Series, since no other New Yorker is playing in the World Series, and the umpire calling bats and balls on me was Karl Rove. He would be biased against me. We have to, Rush Limbaugh and Air America try to get on local stations, and the owners are conservatives who favor him. Citadel owns 260 radio stations, WABC in New York. They have 1,000 hours of conservative talk, 0 progressive talk. Now, this is in a country split red and blue, trending blue. In New York City, WABC and WOR radio are all right-wing all the time. These are the biggest radio stations in New York.
But they have the
and this is New York City.
But wait a minute. Yeah, but they have the audience. What is it about what they're saying or how they're saying it that gets them the audience? You had to bail Air America out. It flopped before you bought it.
My family bought Air America out of bankruptcy in March of this year. And there was previously misspending and mismanagement. I get no credit or blame. But there are built-in problems with progressive talk on radio.
Go.
Well, advertisers have what they call a no-buy list, B-U-Y, and they go, oh, gee, Air America's a little too liberal, a little too anti-war, a little too anti-Bush. I don't want my product associated with them. And for-profit radio is advertising-driven.
Sure.
Second, the stations are owned by people who have a different philosophy, and all I want is a market evaluation. And if we're succeeding in Madison and San Francisco and Los Angeles, we should have bigger signals in Chicago and in New York, and we don't. So we have great talent, a great lineup. We're out of bankruptcy, and we're fighting back, and I'm optimistic about what comes next.
But what makes right-wing talk radio so popular? It's not only the advertisers and the owners, it's the audience. What is it about the message or the messengers that resonates with a fairly significant audience? I mean, it's not huge, but if you're talking about 5% of listeners in terms of radio, that's big.
Well, I came out of a business, electoral politics and government, where you needed 50% plus one to win and govern. So Rush Limbaugh is successful at 6% of the audience. Mm-hmm. So he has found 6% who don't listen maybe to network news, don't listen to NPR, don't listen to CUNY TV. And they're called ditto heads because he says or implies that Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda were like this. Saddam was behind 9/11. There were weapons of mass destruction. And anybody who served in Iraq and now is opposed to the war are phony soldiers. And he said on his radio show last week, anybody who opposes the war can't be a Republican. Now, by the way, a third of Republicans are opposed to the Iraq war. So he makes things up.
Did Senator Hagel say anything about this?
He makes things up, and credulous listeners who don't have other sources of information go, hey, yeah, that's great. So Air America, like Fox, is fair but unbalanced. Like I don't say the earth is flat, the earth is round. Debate. We go, it's round. And here's the evidence. Look at the satellite photo. So we have a point of view, but we're factual. We don't make things up.
And it is less strident than it once was. And it's certainly less strident, at least in my listening, than a lot of the stuff that you hear on ABC and OR and other stations. Even though it may be sympathetic to the way I think.
Look, the word strident, I'm now not being strident. If you were threatening my children, I would get strident.
Right.
So stridency is necessary, maybe a necessary evil. When a country like ours is thinking of a second preemptory attack, this one on Iran, since the first one went so well, what these people are doing is so radical and extreme based on American history. I mean, I was not a fan of Nixon, but he was a fact-based president. He created the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency. He was a moderate Republican, albeit corrupt, we later found out. This crowd is radical. And so I believe that Air America hosts are extremely talented, adequately paid. I negotiate the contracts. Less strident than in the past because it's important to attract a large and a broad audience. And so they are always entertaining, informative, but with an edge.
Are they doing it? Are they expanding the listener base? I mean, have they done any, the Arbitron studies? And
the answer is we hired a great talent in New York. His name is Michael LeBron. His stage name is Lionel. He was the #1 rated talk show host on WOR in the evenings when he was on. Took him away from WOR. He's on our morning show. Extremely funny, quick-witted, sardonic.
I have to agree.
And not a knee-jerk politically. He's by and large progressive, but he takes kind of... I remember when Larry Craig, the senator, toe-tapping senator, first came up, everyone was just condemning Craig. He went, now what did he do? He tapped his foot? Where's the crime? More people now are saying, as Lionel did originally, he should be kicked out of the Senate because he arguably tried to solicit sex. And I remember growing up, occasionally straight guys at bars would convey signals to women to solicit them.
Right.
How else do you do it?
Right.
I'm not defending what he did in the public bathroom.
Right.
And I'm not sure what he did. But the fault there, for example, I had a debate with Tony Perkins on Chris Matthews' Hardball, and they were cluck. Perkins was condemning Craig. And I said, well, the problem is you. Tony Perkins, for insisting Republicans don't have gays in the military or against same-sex marriage, and you repress adults from doing what they want to do privately and force them into these public situations.
Okay. Now, Air America seems to be part of what I think you've called a progressive infrastructure. You've got the Huffington Post, you've got Move On, you've got Daily Kos, you've got The Nation, you've got American Prospect. Is there this infrastructure there? How influential? And then I want to go on to Move On and talk about that Petraeus ad for a bit.
The entities you just named have 10 to 12 million Americans who are members, activists, donating money. It's a base. And the conservatives have a base, the religious right, the wealthier Americans and Business Roundtable. And neither, I guess, is a majority of the country. Independents now will determine elections, as they did in the 2006 congressional, as they will in the 2008 presidential. But often, a majority rules, but exciting and intense minority counts a lot. I'm pro-choice. But the so-called pro-life movement, although a minority, ticket, scream, vote only based on that. That's an intense minority that often gets its way, like on late-term abortion. And so we speak to a base. I hope we have 2 million listeners streaming on radio, on XM, for example, out of a potential audience of, well, 300 million technically, but more like 10 to 12 million. And we do try to give them accurate, passionate information.
Okay. As part of your broadcasting this month, in fact, you're involved in the presidential project at Air America, where all 8 presidential candidates agree to guest host or otherwise communicate their messages for an hour of free airtime. I heard Mike Gravel on the Iran vote, for example, where he asked, do they ever learn? And the question is, do they ever learn? I mean, for example, Hillary Clinton votes for it. What is the impact of these types of votes? Are we making the same mistake again?
Well, the 2 points on the Air America Presidential Project. Richard Green, no relation, same last name, thought it up. He has a show called Clout, on from 8 to 10, and he invited, and we got all 8 Democratic. We invited the Republicans, and we're waiting for an answer. We invited all 8 Democrats. They accepted, and either they do a 2 to 5 minute statement on something they care about. So John Edwards last week spoke about this vote. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama will make statements, and we'll get them shortly. Some of the so-called second-tier candidates agree to guest host, which is fun, and for them it's free time. I believe in broadcasters who get a free public license offering for free to candidates to speak to the public over the public airwaves. And so Gravel was on. He interviewed Ralph Nader.
I know. I listened to it, which is interesting. Given your history, I
don't agree with the vote in the Senate to call the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. Given what Bush did with the 2002 resolution on Iraq, he misconstrued it into a war resolution. I don't trust these people. There's a lot of evidence why we cannot trust a Bush and Cheney. And so I would have voted no. Hillary Clinton voted yes.
Mario Cuomo's been writing op-eds and
Daily News and
the Times, criticizing Congress for abdicating their war powers under the Constitution.
Look, I agree with Governor Cuomo. If there's a hot pursuit, if someone has attacked you, you can follow them as they flee, because in the age of instant response, you may not be able to get a congressional vote. However, Iraq was deliberate, planned. Paul O'Neill, Richard Clark think it may have been planned before the 9/11 attack, because President Bush, 43, so wanted to go after Saddam, irrespective of the facts. And in that situation, look, like it or not, until we amend the Constitution, since 1789, Congress has the right to declare war. The president executes or implements the war. That's what President Washington wanted, and he, of course, was the most illustrious both general and president. He thought that was the best system. That's our system. And now it would be so unconstitutional, counterproductive, and insane for us to attack Iran. I don't want them to have nuclear weapons. I don't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons. But there are political and military reasons that you don't do that. And if we attacked Iran, we would, again, metastasize and multiply terrorism around the world, as our stupid blunder in Iraq is provably doing.
Okay, let's move to 2008. Let's look at what the Draft Mark Green thing calls the usual suspects. 2008 election is going to be an absolutely pivotal election, if not an aligning election. You've got Hillary, Obama, Edwards. Handicap it, strengths, weaknesses, personal preferences.
Well, I'm personally close to Hillary and Bill Clinton. I'm neutral because running Air America Radio, I want every candidate to feel they do have free and fair access, and equal access. Hillary Clinton started ahead, like Tiger Woods entering the last round, 2 strokes ahead, and she's built her lead. Tiger, as we know, almost never loses a golf tournament when he's leading in the final round. Hillary Clinton is pulled away in the last month, financially and in polls. Why? To be blunt, she wouldn't be where she is, one assumes, if she weren't Bill Clinton's wife. However, she's maintaining and increasing her lead because of who she is, not who he was. She is so, in these debates and interviews, smart, tough, resilient, humorous, presidential. She has the experience, the judgment, and the brains to be president. Now, Barack Obama is a phenomenon. I mean, he wins his first 10 games in his rookie year. It's hard for a first-term senator. I guess it's hard in America for an African-American, since no woman or African-American has won. But anybody who says she can't lose and he can't win the nomination is crazy.
And you've been in elections where that's been the case.
Well, I won elections I wasn't supposed to, and lost elections I wasn't supposed to.
Right.
And I just read a book on Bush by Draper, reminding me that in August of '99, the equivalent period in that cycle, George W. Bush was ahead 59-3 over John McCain in New Hampshire. McCain ends up winning New Hampshire by 17 points.
So all things are possible in politics. But for Hillary to lose that lead, she's got to implode.
But she's barely ahead in Iowa.
Right. Now, let's just talk about that very briefly. The timetable, and this timetable is very much in flux. Is Iowa and New Hampshire still as important?
Yes.
She loses Iowa and some of that goes away?
I was with Gary Hart in 1984.
I know you were his chief speechwriter.
I was, yes. And when Walter Mondale won Iowa 46% to 16%, the 16% was the news because Hart did better than expected. And he built on that, won New Hampshire, and came this close to winning the nomination. So Hillary Clinton, everyone is saying, is ahead nationally in money in polls. That's true. However, in Iowa, it will turn on these Iowans who often turn against frontrunners. The chief reporter of the Iowa paper said, oh, Hillary's ahead slightly in Iowa in polls. That's trouble, because these contrarian Iowa Democrats will vote against somebody purely for that reason. Second, it turns on organization. Right. Howard Dean was ahead in polls and lost in Iowa.
Right.
So you got to rate her a better than even money chance of being the nominee. And then, because of this perfect storm against the Republicans on Iraq, the economy, racial intolerance, anti-children on the S-chip vote, it's all coming together to make it the Democratic nominee, unless something changes.
And that something could be what?
Like, God forbid, an attack.
And that would play into Republican hands? I mean, Hillary argued that.
That was one of her few mistakes, in my view. She doesn't answer hypothetical questions. Well, how would you do? You don't want to answer that.
Right.
She answered it. And at an event, maybe she didn't think the press was there, she said, well, if there's an attack, it could help the Republicans because people would rally. The answer is, I don't know, because we've been burnt once. There was an attack. Even after the Bay of Pigs failure, the country rallies behind the only president we had. 90% rallied behind George W. Bush, of course, was in no way responsible for 9/11. But we now know that he overplayed his hand and reacted in a way that makes America less secure by going into Iraq rather than focusing on Afghanistan. And so if there's an attack, will Americans say, wait a second, Republicans said that they kept us safe since 2001. We've been attacked. They've been in office. You blame them. Or would they say, incarcerate every Arab just to be safe, like we incarcerated the Japanese during World War II? I'm not going to guess which way it would go. And Senator Clinton probably regrets that she made that guess.
Okay, let's turn to the Republicans. Let's turn to your friend and former sparring partner, Rudy Giuliani. He's got more flip and flops than a beached fish. It doesn't look like the same Rudy Giuliani. What about the Republican? Comment on that in the Republican nomination.
Giuliani is not the Giuliani we knew, but since he's flip-flopped a lot, but less than Mitt Romney.
Right.
Romney has been the one accused of it more than Rudy Giuliani. We knew Giuliani, who has the smarts and the discipline to be president, but not the character and the temperament, in my view. He's an abusive, angry, authoritarian kind of guy. However, he never would have said that he'd vote for anti-choice justices. He understood that the Second Amendment does not, according to the Supreme Court, give an individual the right to bear arms. The 1939 court said
Militias,
no.
right.
He makes believe that it said the opposite. He was pro-immigrant. He, of course, is the son of immigrants. I'm the grandson of immigrants. Suddenly, he goes to Philadelphia to buy a Philly cheesesteak because the owner had a sign, order in English only. What kind of message is that? It's not the message Mayor Giuliani would have given 10 years ago.
We have 1 minute. A third party? A fourth party?
Sure. Third and fourth parties don't run to win, but to make a point. And if the religious right means what they say, that life begins at conception, and Giuliani is pro-choice, except for justices, they may run a third party. They don't care if Republicans lose. They'll come back with a more radical candidate in 2012. That alone, they threatened to do that. That alone could cost the Republican nominee the presidency.
Bloomberg?
Unlikely. I know him. We get along very well now.
Right.
And he's not a loser. If he ran, he would lose.
Right.
I don't think he wants to go out of his public life a loser. He wants to go out a winner. And he has a nice post-mayoralty set up in terms of being one of the world's leading philanthropists.
If you had to pick the Republican you would most like to run against among the sort of the top tier, who would you want to run against?
Tom Trancato. I know what you mean. I don't know who I would want to run against. Each of the three are very flawed, which is why the Republicans can't seem to figure out who they want. Hillary Clinton is...
Well, there's four of them. McCain, Romney, Rudy, and Thompson.
I wanted the Democrats to run against Ronald Reagan in 1980. You see my point?
Yes.
Fortunately, I don't have a vote. But I have a 70 to 80% confidence that whoever the Democrat is will win the presidency because Bush and Cheney's one-man rule has so ruined our international reputation and median income in this country that there'll be a voter rebellion.
We'll check up on you. We'll check up on you in the spring and then in the fall. More.
Anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.